There are interviews that disappear within a week, and then there are interviews that never really leave the conversation. Back in 2019, Prince Andrew sat down with the BBC for what was supposed to be a chance to explain his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Instead, that interview quickly became one of the most talked about royal moments in recent history. But here's where things get interesting. Years later, newly released emails connected to the Epstein files are raising fresh questions about what was said during that interview and whether parts of that story actually line up with what was happening behind the scenes. According to the transcript and the emails discussed in the investigation, the biggest issue isn't just the friendship itself, it's the timeline. During the interview, Prince Andrew repeatedly suggested that after Epstein's legal troubles became public, he distanced himself and eventually cut off contact entirely. In fact, he said that after a visit in New York in 2010, the relationship was over. From that day forward, he said, there was no contact. But what stands out in the documents now being discussed is that several emails appear to suggest the opposite. And that contradiction is exactly why people are talking about this story again. Because when a public figure makes a clear statement on record, and later evidence appears to tell a different story, it naturally raises questions. So the real issue here isn't just the friendship. It's what the emails reveal about the story that followed. And once you look closely at those messages, the timeline starts to look a lot more complicated. One of the central moments in the Newsnight interview was Prince Andrew's explanation of when his relationship with Epstein ended.
Well, I ceased contact with him after I was aware that he was under investigation, and that was later on in 2006. And I wasn't in touch with him again until 2010. So it was one of those things that if somebody's going through that sort of thing, well, I'm terribly sorry, I can't be.
So no contact?
No contact.
When he was serving time, there was no call, no letter, nothing there?
No.
Except here's an email from Andrew to Epstein in 2009. Please, may I stay in your beautiful apartment again? Andrew was asking about using Epstein's place in Paris.
He suggested that once Epstein was facing serious allegations and legal trouble, he stopped being in contact. Later, he described a visit to Epstein's New York home in 2010 as a final conversation. Essentially a moment where he says he ended the relationship. According to his explanation, he met Epstein in person to tell him that continuing the friendship wasn't appropriate. And from that point forward, he claimed there was no further contact. On paper, that sounds like a clear turning point. But the emails that later surfaced seemed to paint a more complicated picture. According to the transcript, there was reportedly an email from 2009, a time when Prince Andrew said there was no contact, where he asked Epstein if he could stay in his apartment in Paris. If accurate, that alone would place communication right in the middle of the period when the relationship was supposedly paused. And then there's another message that raised eyebrows. After Epstein finished serving his sentence, one email reportedly sent from Andrew included a short but notable message congratulating him on being released. Now again, Prince Andrew has consistently denied wrongdoing, and these emails don't prove criminal activity. But what they do appear to do is challenge the timeline that was described publicly. And once the timeline becomes unclear, every other detail starts getting examined more closely. Which brings us to the moment that many viewers still remember the most, that walk in the park.
Look, because of what has happened, I don't think it is appropriate that we should remain in contact. And by mutual agreement during that walk in the park, we decided that we would part company, and I left, I think it was the next day. And to this day, I never had any contact with him from that day forward.
But contact showed no signs of stopping. Soon after, Andrew was back in the UK. It was great to spend time with my US family. Looking forward to joining you all again soon, he told Epstein. I'll call you tomorrow, as I'm moving the family up to Sandringham.
One of the most famous images from this entire controversy is a photograph taken in New York. It shows Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein walking together in Central Park. During the interview, Andrew described that walk as the moment he ended the relationship. He said the purpose of visiting Epstein in New York was to personally tell him that their friendship had to end. In his version of events, the conversation happened during that walk. They mutually agreed to part ways, and that was the end of contact. But according to the emails discussed in the investigation, that may not have been the end. In fact, some messages appear to show communication continuing after that visit. One email reportedly sent after Andrew returned to the UK included a friendly message about spending time together and looking forward to reconnecting. Another message months later suggested they might play some more soon. Even holiday messages appeared to surface, including communication around Christmas. So, if these emails are accurate, the relationship may have continued in ways that weren't acknowledged during the interview. And that's why this story keeps resurfacing, because the gap between the public explanation and the documented communication is exactly where public curiosity grows. But the timeline issue wasn't the only moment that drew attention during the interview. Another part of the conversation became even more controversial.
So, you've seen the photo?
I've seen the photograph.
How do you explain that?
I can't. Because I have absolutely no memory of that photograph ever being taken.
But an email from Ghislaine Maxwell again appears to confirm that there was a meeting with Giuffre that evening at Maxwell's London house, and that the photo was taken there. In a draft statement she sent to Jeffrey Epstein in 2015, she wrote, "In 2001, I was in London when met a number of friends of mine, including Prince Andrew. A photograph was taken, as I imagine she wanted to show it to friends and family."
The question about a photograph. At one point in the interview, the conversation shifted to a photograph that has circulated widely online. The image shows Prince Andrew standing with Virginia Roberts, later known as Virginia Giuffre, with Ghislaine Maxwell also present in the background. During the interview, Andrew said he had no recollection of meeting her. None whatsoever. That statement immediately became one of the most discussed parts of the entire interview. Because according to the transcript and later reports, there were internal emails and draft statements being discussed behind the scenes regarding those allegations. In one draft communication referenced in the transcript, Maxwell reportedly acknowledged that a photograph had been taken during a gathering in London in 2001. The message suggested that several friends were present and that a photo was taken during the evening. Again, Prince Andrew has consistently denied the allegations connected to that claim. But the apparent acknowledgement of the meeting itself added another layer of confusion to the timeline. So now there were two major questions circulating publicly. First, the contact timeline with Epstein. And second, the question of whether that meeting happened. And when those two issues combined with the now infamous interview performance, the story became even bigger. But there's another detail from the emails that some observers believe may be just as significant. The role of official communication. Beyond the personal messages, another detail mentioned in the transcript caught the attention of investigators. Some emails reportedly showed Prince Andrew sending Epstein documents connected to his role as a trade envoy. According to the reporting referenced in the transcript, those included information related to official trips, including documents connected to travel in Afghanistan. If accurate, this suggests that the communication between the two men may have extended beyond social contact. Now again, it's important to say clearly that none of this proves wrongdoing. But the optics matter, especially when a public figure has stated that contact had ended. And that's why U.S. authorities reportedly tried for years to get Prince Andrew to provide testimony about what he knew regarding Epstein. According to emails referenced in the investigation, officials eventually concluded that efforts to obtain a voluntary interview had been exhausted. And despite multiple requests, there has still been no public testimony from Andrew in that investigation. That absence has kept the story alive, because when questions remain unanswered, public interest doesn't fade, it grows. And the final moment of that BBC interview may explain why.
His response, once again, relies on the claim that he'd cut ties with Epstein on that New York trip in 2010.
I know that I made the wrong judgment and I made the wrong decision, but I made the wrong decision and the wrong judgment, I believe, fundamentally for the right reasons, which is to say to somebody, I'm not going to see you again. And in fact, from that day forth, I was never in contact with him.
The emails show he was frequently still in contact. That included sending Epstein official documents from Andrew's trips as trade envoy, including confidential information from Afghanistan.
Near the end of the interview, Emily Maitlis asked Prince Andrew a direct question. Did he feel guilt, regret, or shame about his association with Epstein? Andrew responded that visiting Epstein in 2010 was a mistake, a wrong judgment. But he also said he believed he made that decision for what he described as the right reasons. And for many viewers, that answer didn't fully address the bigger concern. Because by that point, the issue had moved beyond the visit itself. The real question had become whether the public explanation matched what actually happened afterward. The emails that later surfaced appear to suggest continued communication, something that doesn't align neatly with the no contact claim repeated during the interview. And that's why, even years later, the story continues to resurface. Not because new accusations are being made, but because people are revisiting the original explanation. When documents emerge that seem to contradict a public statement, it naturally raises a deeper question. What really happened behind the scenes? And more importantly, what hasn't been explained yet? Tell me in the comments what you think about this. Do you believe the timeline confusion is simply a misunderstanding, or do you think there are still unanswered questions here? If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure you subscribe for more deep dives into major public controversies and the stories behind them. And in the next video, we're going to look at another moment where a single interview completely changed the public perception of a powerful figure.